what I eventually realized and what Movement's thesis is that events drive a cycle of high intent and spend. And so our wedge into the market is event registrations, but that's just the start for Movement. We want to connect athletes, organizers, and brands with all of the services they need to have a great experience.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Zack Isaacs, co-founder and CEO of Movement. In this episode, we talk about modernizing athletic event registration for organizers, brands, and athletes. Plus, we discuss Movement for brands, bringing data and accountability to event sponsorship, and what it takes to win in a legacy category. Let's get into it. The Fitt Insider Podcast is presented by EGYM. EGYM's smart fitness ecosystem is transforming healthcare through exercise. Combining strength equipment with AI-powered software and corporate wellness platform WellPass, it's leading the shift to proactive preventative health. Learn more about EGYM's intelligent workout solutions at egym.com. Hi, Zach. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Joe. It's great to be here.
Yeah, excited to chat about everything you guys have going on, growing super quickly. So a very exciting time to introduce, at least this audience, more folks to Movement. So why don't you tell us about yourself, about the company, and then we'll get into it from there.
I am an engineer by trade. I don't know if you can see my background, but it's a bunch of bikes back there. And bicycling has always been sort of an outside portion of my personality, if I'm being honest. My parents met on a bike ride. I've raced bikes since I was in high school. And then professionally, I've only ever done things in the cycling industry. So I worked at bike shops growing up. I worked for a pro cycling team. And then I was an early employee at Strava. Started the API team at Strava as an engineer. Got to lead a bunch of really cool engineering projects at Strava, including the 0 to 1 launch of routes, which was a big feature at Strava at the time, right before COVID. And now we're working on Movement, and Movement is the platform for athletic events. So if you think about Strava and the atomic unit being the activity, the run or the ride, the way I think about Movement is our atomic unit is the event, and everything at Movement revolves around that event.
Very cool. And you certainly come to it very authentically, as you described. I think when we initially met, you were just left Strava, and like it seemed to me like this was pretty much your whole life. Whether you talk about within work, but also outside of work. And so having the opportunity to do this, it like in a much needed space, you could say, just when you think about, me too, personally, all types of endurance events or, triathlon or running events and even things outside of that, but just the kind of legacy platforms, maybe not great, maybe not the best kind of user experience for the individual athlete, but also for event organizers. But just like, how do you think about the space now? How did you think about it when you were starting to formulate Movement? And then like the company's take on how you're different or better, or maybe both?
I definitely had a lot of experience with events like you from the athlete side. And so, I'd signed up for a million bike races and running races over the years. And I always just felt like that experience was pretty hollow. When you cross the line at an event, it's generally a joyful experience. Like people are having this memorable experience that sticks with them oftentimes for the rest of their lives. And I felt like the registration platforms that were present weren't capturing any of that joy. And so, from an athlete perspective, I definitely felt like things could be improved. And then I started interviewing organizers and brands, and I realized that the same was true for them. And so I started learning that all of these organizers, they all have the same sets of problems that nobody is helping them with, and they're very siloed. So every organizer needs a timer and t-shirts and porta potties and sponsors and a million things and cancellation insurance, and nobody's helping them find any of those services or make their job any easier. And what I eventually realized and what Movement's thesis is that events drive a cycle of high intent and spend. And so our wedge into the market is event registrations, but that's just the start for Movement. We want to connect athletes, organizers, and brands with all of the services they need to have a great experience. And I think that connectivity is what differentiates us. Most of our competition thinks about events as like registration and results, and they provide very little value in between those 2 points. Whereas we want to win the entire event life cycle. And we want to do that by helping athletes have more fun and by helping organizers and the brands that sponsor events make as much money as they can.
Yeah, I totally see the kind of the problems, the friction, the gaps that exist in this kind of space, and also the challenges that that presents. Because as you're talking about it, even like, okay, the athlete, the brand, the timing, the like operations, logistics, you really are solving a myriad of problems like for vastly kind of different customers in some ways, or at least users on the platform. So that creates this challenge of like, okay, which one of these things do we tackle? Kind of like in which order is to not be like totally overwhelmed. How do you triage that? How have you approached it to this point to make sure it's like, hey, we're doing the things that are kind of foundational to the platform versus like maybe a vanity or an add-on or something that's just going to fall by the wayside and not actually move the needle?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Being at the center of an event ecosystem is a double-edged sword because, as you said, there's so many different types of people interacting with movement. But if you try and build for all of them, you'll build for none of them well. And so today we spend probably 80% of our time building for the organizer, so the person actually creating the event. And the reason we started with that is because the organizer decides which platform the event goes to. And so it made sense for us to build directly who we're selling to. Um, the big thing that we're shifting into this year is building for brands. And so actually, like starting this week, we just launched this new product called Movement for Brands, and it's a brand facing product to help brands get more out of their event sponsorships. And so we're spending about currently half of our time on that new product, while we spend about half of our time continuing to build for organizers. And so as we continue to grow, we're going to go from mostly focusing on organizers to focusing on brands. And then I think the real vision is to deliver an awesome experience for athletes. When you think about the current age that we're in, something that with AI and everything else, something that a lot of people are talking about is defensibility. I think a lot about that, and we want to build first for like a deep integration with organizer and brand workflows because we feel like a deep integration into their workflows is defensible. And then we want to basically do Strava's playbook, which is like the community playbook and the compound data advantage. And so if you have a bunch of people on your platform giving each other kudos and, interacting on your platform, that community, somebody can just copy your features, but they can't copy your community. And so that's how we're thinking about it.
Going from, hey, we have this idea to getting some organizers on the platform and then just really thinking about like scaling a go to market in terms of the types of folks that you initially targeted, the maybe the size and types of races that worked, and like how you're really seeing, oh, this is how we can build this function, like this sales function and partnership function within the company to know like, oh, we can really have an impact for like these types of races and scale from there.
I mean, the way that we got started was pretty scrappy. I owned the domain movement.cc. And before we got started, like really the first thing I built was just a bunch of landing pages for different types of users. So I built one for cyclists, one for runners, one for triathlon organizers and triathletes, one for running organizers and biking organizers. And we just put those up on the internet. And with the call to action to just enter your email address and say, like, hey, if you're a cyclist, sign up here to learn about the future of endurance events. And we got 1,000 people to do that, and we spent like $10 a day on Google Ads, but we got 1,000 people to do that. And those were our first 1,000 users. And because it was so easy to acquire those users, that gave me conviction that, oh, yeah, this is a really good idea. And so I actually built the MVP and built all the events functionality that we needed. In terms of actually figuring out which events we should serve, I would say that has been an iterative process and something we've learned over time. Originally, we were serving smaller event organizers because, frankly, their needs are less complicated and they're more likely to pick up the phone. And so we were serving them kind of because we had access to them. But now what we've learned is that when we win a big organizer, and especially one that's influential in their market, that leads to us winning most of the market in that area. And so now we spend most of our time going after the largest organizers we can reasonably win, because if the race might be 10 times larger, but it doesn't take 10 times more effort to win that organizer. And when we do, we often win a lot of the races in their area. So that's been our strategy, but it's not something we sort of launched with. It's something we kind of learned over time.
I've heard that kind of rationale applied to like just choosing what you work on in general, like problems to solve. It's like you're gonna put all your effort towards it, so you might as well put it towards like the biggest thing as you framed it, like that you can reasonably do because it's not going to take up any less of your time, so to speak. So in doing that now, do you think of it, and I'm just thinking kind of like at the broader event mass participation kind of software registration landscape is like, hey, we want to do the New York City Marathon or what have you, or is it, somewhere in between, or maybe building towards that someday?
Yeah, I think we want to win events that are on the scale of the New York City Marathon. We actually don't want to win the New York City Marathon because it just got bought by Haku, and Haku is one of our competitors, and they do stuff that we do not want to do, like actually produce the event. We want to be a tech company that supports the organizer producing the event. We don't want to actually produce it ourselves. And so when we think about what we can and should reasonably win, I would say that we draw the line at event production. And so that would be a great example of one we it's actually off of our radar. But SF Marathon, Grandma's Marathon, Falmouth Road Race, like all those really big ones that where there's actually an organizer producing it, we want to support those people.
This idea of building an actual community, like having a network, not just this kind of, hey, you log on to, in some instances, like the nameless, faceless platform. The experience may or may not be great. Most of the time, not super great. And then it's over. Whereas what's happening with all that athlete data, everybody else that's signing up for their race, like where you're training, what happens after the race, like all these things that I think, even in my conversations with different operators over the years, like the idea has certainly been there percolating and some people have tried to tackle it. Like, even if you run the kind of Strava playbook, the kudos and the community, like how far, I guess, down the path are you now of building that? And like, how are you thinking about progressing that in the future?
It's really hard to build that network yourself. And so what we've started doing before building it ourselves is we've basically growth hacked other platforms and integrated with other platforms where those connections already exist. And so we have a couple of integrations, one, or actually we have two integrations with Meta and two with Strava. And the whole reason we integrate with those platforms is because that is where the people who are your friends who are running and riding live. And so we have basically integrated with those platforms to, use those networks that already exist while we build our own user base. Because, if we could say like, yeah, you can build whatever features you want again on Movement, but we don't have 100 million people like Strava does yet. And so the impact of those network effects is far less. And so, in part because I used to work at Strava and started the API team, we have a really great integration with them where we basically send all of your training data to Strava for any event you sign up for. And this magical thing happens where your friends see that you're training for Falmouth Road Race or, Mid South 100, and then they sign up for it too. And like every single week, somebody on our team gets a text message from a friend or a friend of a friend who basically signs up for a race because they see that someone else is doing it on Strava. And so we're starting with off platform because it's easier to growth hack your way into a large network there, but eventually we will bring that functionality on platform.
On the point of the kind of training and word of mouth and people interacting, how has, call it the last 2-ish years. I mean, I know the company's still pretty young. I think it started in 2023, but even call it the last 2, 3 years, like run clubs, Strava's growth in and of itself, the interest in running and signing up for an event. Have you seen like that impact in the company and just like the interest both from organizers and athletes to like meet that demand?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we have a great product, but we also are fortunate to have good timing. And we've absolutely been riding on the coattails of COVID with everyone being interested in running and biking. And we've seen a ton of growth in the industry. I mean, Strava has their industry reports that say the same thing. But yeah, we've really been doing well with newer athletes, especially who have less exposure to endurance sports. I think in part because movement is more approachable and better designed. We've actually interviewed people about like why they might sign up for things on movement and doing things like leading with imagery and showing the course map prominently and showing a start list so you can verify that your friends are doing it. Those types of things get people who are on the fence to sign up. Whereas, if you've been a bike racer for 10 years, you might not care about any of that stuff. But, the real big growth in the market is the people who are going from the couch to the 5K, and I think we serve those people well.
This episode of the Fitt Insider Podcast is brought to you by EGYM. EGYM makes some of the most innovative strength training machines on the market, but that's only one part of their integrated ecosystem. With connected fitness equipment, AI-powered gym software, and a comprehensive corporate wellness offering, it's forging the future of preventative health. Partnering with companies worldwide, EGYM's WellPass program improves employee health by expanding access to premier fitness and health facilities. Upgrading gym floors, EGYM equips every operator with smart equipment and AI tools to create hyper-personalized training plans for every exerciser. Putting it all together, they're transforming healthcare through exercise. Experience the power of EGYM's ecosystem at egym.com. You mentioned it there. It was kind of like on my list of things that I wanted to talk to you about is just the design element of like from the brand to how you're choosing to feature events to the user experience. I think all those things Movement does incredibly well. Initially, when I first discovered the company, it was like, oh, this is exactly what the space needs. It's fresh, super clean, really easy to navigate, like really thoughtful in terms of, like I said, the branding and design. Does that come from you? Is that, you mentioned obviously engineer and having previously worked at Strava, like the design, just like the vibe, all those things that then carries over into this kind of almost Stripe-esque feel in terms of like super slick functionality and all those things.
Thanks. I'm honored that you connected us to Stripe because they give me a lot of inspiration. I would say, honestly, when it comes to design, I know what I like, but I don't feel like I have really great skills there. I was able to hire Olia Birulia, who actually led the design on my team for the routes 0 to 1 at Strava. And so she leads all design at Movement now. And she is literally the best designer I've ever worked with. And I'm so grateful to work with her every day. Like she is just a master of her craft and, she makes product experiences that are a joy to use and is extremely thoughtful in how she does research and builds UI. And so most of the credit has to go to her.
How do you think about that just within the team and continuing to make that, I guess, integral to the the entire platform as you continue to scale? Because, when you're a much smaller company and you have somebody, let's say that it's like a design-led company or a product-led company, it's much easier at this kind of smaller scale to say like, hey, these are the things that we're going to prioritize and continue to either hire for or optimize as we grow versus reaching a certain scale. I don't want to say companies compromise, but it can start to like drift from that initial focus. How do you think about like both that kind of like design piece and like maintaining that like Stripe vibe versus like growth and like where the trade-offs might be?
Yeah, I mean it's really tough. There's always tension between quality and speed, and that is one of the hardest things about product development, in my opinion, is figuring out where to land within that tension for whatever you're building. And my belief is that on that spectrum of speed to quality, you have to be honest with yourself about your conviction and whatever it is you're building. And so if you actually have conviction that what you're going to be building is going to be used by a ton of people and really important to your business, then you should build for quality. If you're, on the other hand, running an experiment or a feature that might not matter to your company in 6 months, then you should optimize for speed rather than quality and design. And if you do run an experiment and you run it quickly and it gains traction, you might end up rewriting the feature for that quality and that like great design. And, we've fallen prey to this, but I think that that's just part of the price you pay for experimenting quickly. And so that's something we talk about all the time and is a really tricky one is when to prioritize speed versus quality.
Building that team and kind of carrying that through, like that mentality, and even hearing you talk about things, it's obvious like you're super thoughtful and considered and intentional about the things that you're doing. How have you been able to like kind of carry that over into the hiring and growing when it is much like the product, it is a kind of trade-off of like, we have to move fast, like we need somebody in this role, we have to keep growing, but like we want to make sure we get the, the right person and that can, maintain that culture that you've obviously intentionally built. What has that experience been like? How have you been able to do it thus far?
Hiring is probably one of the things I think that I am actually the best at. And I think it's somebody who's smarter than me told me a phrase that really stuck with me, which is the team you build is the company you build. And so I focus a lot on how to build the best team. You can really de-risk people by having worked with them before and by knowing them. And so most of movement actually came from Strava. And so we have Olia, who I worked with on routes. We have Rod Gutierrez, who actually was my boss at Strava, who is one of the best engineering leaders I've ever worked with. We have Julia Jashka, who's our founding engineer, who I hired as an intern to Strava. We worked together at Strava for many years, and then she came to Movement as our first engineer, and so on and so forth. And we don't just hire from Strava, we hire from everywhere, but we try to hire from within our network. And when you do that, it just leads to a far less bad hires. And I'm not going to say that I have not made bad hires. Like I certainly have made mistakes, but when you make mistakes, you can't let them fester. You just have to fix it. And so, I try to hire from within our network, and then when there's a problem, we address it.
It's also been really cool. I mean, we kind of see this over all the time, like both in terms of like growing our team, but we run a recruiting business as well. And like the number of people that kind of come to us and it's like, hey, I'm super passionate about health and fitness and wellness and some and running, endurance sports, this and that. And like I happen to be an engineer or product developer, you name the role. And it's like this job would be my dream to be able to like marry these things. And so I'm sure you get that as well. And especially like coming from Strava, I'm sure they got that as well. But it does kind of give you this built-in culture almost of like, oh, these people just like get me, they get the product, they get the team. And if you kind of like encountered that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there are a lot of parallels between what makes someone a consistent and, you know, good endurance athlete and what makes them great at their job. And that's consistency, putting in the work, showing up on time, being willing to take risks. But yeah, I think that there's just a lot of parallels between being successful in endurance sport and being successful in your job. And so I do think that, I think that endurance athletes make great employees in part for that reason. They're just really good at training.
The process in putting in the work is not something you have to teach them. It's kind of like naturally ingrained by that point. When you think about kind of changing gears a little bit and thinking about now, it's still pretty early in the year, February, and laying out the roadmap and talking about priorities. You talked a little bit more about, or you talked a little bit earlier about launching movement for brands. What else is, if you think about KPIs or goals or just things that like you're excited about and building towards, that you're both communicating with the team like, hey, we need to nail these things, and also talking to organizers about like, hey, we hear you and like these things will be coming online.
I feel really good about our core event organizer product. And I think we really have product market fit on that one. And if we continue building the way we've been building, I think we're doing all the right things and well positioned to keep winning the registrations market. I think that brands are the really big bet we're taking this quarter. And the reason we're taking that bet is because if you think about like how organizers again are our core, like there's a lot of people involved in events, but organizers are our core user and the type of user we care the most about. If you think about flow of funds for an organizer, they have athletes who pay them, they have brands that pay them, and then they pay all their vendors, including the sponsor. But the biggest checks come from brand to organizer. And so there's a lot of leverage there. And there's a lot of organizers who have no sponsors or no idea how to negotiate a sponsorship. And so, what we want to do is we want to help all the organizers on Movement get sponsors, like world class sponsors from all of the best brands. But we also want to help every brand get more out of their sponsorship because today I'm not aware of a single platform out there that actually connects and integrates brands with their events that they're sponsoring. They're just completely cut out of the online experience altogether. But brands spend about as much money sponsoring events as athletes do signing up for them. And so that doesn't make any sense. So we've been able to partner with about 5 brands as design partners to build this product. We're just now like accepting more, but in a year's time we want a world-class brand like Scratch to say, hey, we want to keep sponsoring your race, but only if it's on Movement, because we get so much more out of our sponsorship when it's on Movement. And so that will be great for the organizer because they'll be getting, connected with Scratch and other world-class brands. And we hope it'll also drive the registrations flywheel because organizers will come to us in order to get sponsors they wouldn't otherwise have access to.
Yeah, super smart and much needed in the space. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about like what does getting more out of the sponsorship mean? And I know it's like obviously early, but in terms of like how you're thinking about it and even pitching it, like where can you drive value?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few places, but the really simple things are I'll give you a simple example and I'll give you like a more innovative example. Like the simple example is we can just show brands aggregate data about the people who are going to the race. So like we can show them a heat map of all the views and signups of like where everyone's coming from. We can show them a breakdown of gender and age. We can show them how many people signed up and their average, like how much they paid on average. That's like the simple thing for us to do. And we're definitely like that exists today. Some really crazy innovative ideas that I think would be cool is like, hey, we already have race photography on Movement. So what if we let a timer put a camera at the finish line and then in addition to that camera recording you so you can see yourself crossing the finish line, what if we then like keep track of all the brands people are wearing so we can see if your sponsorship actually affects the clothes that people are wearing at the race, stuff like that. And so I just think that there's like so much we can do to help brands understand the value of their sponsorship dollars. Like we talk to brands all the time that some of the brands actually sponsor over 1,000 events a year, and they all they get in return is goodwill. They don't get a single piece of data. And so we feel like we can really modernize that experience and help them just get way more out of it.
Scaling that up, you mentioned kind of having like some initial partners and then testing that and then potentially opening up more broadly. Is that something that will it be a marketplace? Will it be maybe initially like more account management oversight than like a true marketplace? But how are you treating that as it like kind of opens up more broadly?
Yeah, there will be two components to it. One will be a marketplace where we're actually making recommendations based on what the brand's looking for and what the organizer's looking for. So, if an organizer already has this footwear title sponsor, like if ASICS is sponsoring their event, they're not going to want Nike in there, you know. And so we can help find those matches. But then for events that have existing sponsors, we can just help those sponsors get more out of the partnership. So it'll be both.
Talking primarily about running, cycling, how are you thinking just about the entire event landscape, whether that's maybe more triathlon, maybe that's obviously like things like fitness racing right now or fitness competitions, run clubs. Where do you see movement kind of fitting in and growing over time?
The two that we are focused on most right now are gravel within cycling, because gravel's the biggest part of cycling, and road running and running, because that's also the biggest part of running. And so those are the two we're focused most deeply on, and they're also the two that have the most competition. And so we think that doing a good job for road running and gravel cycling will enable us to do a really great job for those sort of like peripheral parts of the endurance ecosystem. I mean, without spending any marketing dollars or really trying to win these markets intentionally, we've had really great success with triathlon and high rocks, for example. And I think that those people, like, if you're doing a triathlon or you're doing a high rocks event, chances are you're also doing like a 5K or a bike race. And so these organizers, they do each other's races. They'll do a race on Movement, say, hey, this is great. And then we're getting more and more of those people then creating their own races. So there's some cool network effects that, I hope will continue to compound as we grow.
Fueling that growth, I mean, obviously continuing to sign up organizers, have the cash flow growing that, but also in terms of funding the company, just how have you approached raising money where you are now, what that looks like going forward? And just from our part, for transparency, Fit Capital, our investment fund, is an investor in Movement, and we're super excited about the company early on, as we try to, be one of the first checks in. And so getting a chance to see you build that from that point and now where you've grown it to and have the potential to grow, where are you in, that stage and thinking about fundraising and just like how you continue to keep that momentum?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super honored to be able to partner with you and Anthony from First Check, and I think you guys have good taste. Um, um, we raised a pre-seed in Q1 of 24, and then an inside seed in Q1 of 25. So to date, we've raised 3.185 million, which is really not very much. And a lot of we have a different fundraising strategy than most. I will say that my goal is to take many of the learnings that we had from Strava and not make some of those same mistakes. Like, take what really worked well from a fundraising perspective and not some of the things that didn't work so well. I The other person on my board is Michael Horvath, who co-founded Strava, and so he has been instrumental in sort of guiding me in this path. And my goal with fundraising is to raise the smallest amount of capital that I need in order to seize the opportunity. And so, you know, if we have a great competitor who comes out and is spending a ton of money to win customers, and I feel like we need to raise in order to stay competitive, of course I'm going to do that. But to date, we've been able to raise a really small amount of capital, that has fueled what was 10x revenue growth last year. And so for right now, we're really stoked about our growth and our ability to execute with what we have. We've had many periods actually over the last 2 years of profitability without really trying. And I think that as we look forward, I'm really excited about building an enduring and profitable business. But we're not just going to raise until the cows come home just because we can. Like, what really brings me joy is building product and helping like build really deep product market fit for customers that I'm passionate about, which are organizers of athletic events. And so we're going to raise the smallest amount of capital we need in order to seize that opportunity.
Thinking about continuing kind of that mission of building product and then serving the organizers, brands, athletes, where should people follow along, get in touch, maybe if they're organizers or anything else that you would point them to?
Yeah, I would say, if you're an organizer of an event or a brand looking to sponsor events, hit us up, movement.cc. We have contact pages there for both brands and organizers, and we'd love to hear from you.
Perfect. We'll make sure everything is easy to find in the show notes. Super excited to get a chance to chat today and share this conversation. So thanks for making time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you got value from the conversation, please consider subscribing and sharing the podcast with a friend or colleague. It's a massive help. And if you want more content like this, including news and insights on the latest industry developments, subscribe to the Fitt Insider newsletter at insider.fit.co. And one more thing, you can learn more about our recruiting and consulting services at fit.co. That's FITT.co. I'll see you here next week.